He's a pastor of Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship in Texas, but today he's chosen to be with New Hope Christian Fellowship. Would you give a warm welcome to Dr. Tony Evans as he comes?
Good morning. I've told every service, any excuse to come to Hawaii is a good one. And so I am delighted to be with you here today. I am honored to be with such a great church, having such great ministry, great pastor. It's a privilege to be with you. I'm thankful. My son, of course, Anthony, has ministered to you. I hear my daughter, Priscilla Shire, will be with you soon. So we might as well buy a house on the island and let the family come over here, because we are indeed blessed for the privilege of being able to minister to this great church and this great flock of the Lord here. So thank you for allowing me to be with you. They said I brought 4 books: Kingdom Man and Kingdom Woman, How to Be a Man and a Woman Under the Rule of God, and then Victory in Spiritual Warfare, how to determine what the enemy is trying to do and how to get over on him before he gets over on you. And then Destiny, how to see and know where God is trying to take you. So those books will be available afterwards. But we're delighted to be with you today and to be able to proclaim God's truth. I've served as chaplain of the Dallas Cowboys. I see we have some spiritual people here. And when the Cowboys take the field, 3 teams take the field. There's the home team, then there's the visiting team, and the home team and the visiting team are in conflict. They're never going to agree because they're headed to 2 different goal lines. One is going this way, another is going that way, and so they clash as they try to stop each other's progress. It's perpetual conflict because there is no point of agreement. But in the middle of these 2 teams, there is a 3rd team placed on the field, the team of officials. Now this 3rd team, the team of officials, are on the field, but they're not of the field. See, they don't belong to either of the 2 teams. They belong to the league. The league office is 300 Park Avenue in New York City. Behind the executive chair sits Roger Goodell. He's the commissioner of the National Football League. The commissioner in New York has representatives on the field of play called officials. Their job is to bring the governance and guidelines of the kingdom in New York onto the field of play. Each official has been handed a rule book. That rule book gives the guidelines by which all decisions are to be made on the field of play. An official's personal opinion becomes irrelevant. His emotional attachment to a team becomes irrelevant, because his job is to make the calls on the field that come from the office above. Sometimes the official will be cheered because everybody will like the call he made. Other times the officials will be booed because people don't like the call they made. But the officials are not on the field for a popularity contest. They're on the field to bring the rules from above into the chaos below, to bring the governance that belongs in the kingdom up there and bring it to the chaos on the field down here. You and I are part of another kingdom. You and I have a commissioner, another king, and each one of us as followers of Jesus Christ has been duly authorized to be his officiating crew in a world in chaos. You and I are living in a world that is collapsing upon itself. We're living in a nation that is collapsing under the weight of its own demise. You and I have been placed here as followers of Jesus Christ to act on his behalf, his officiating crew. Since he is seated in the kingdom up north, he has placed us on the field down south in order to represent that kingdom in this location. Jesus called a meeting. That meeting is recorded for us in Matthew chapter 28. We know it as the Great Commission. It is the only meeting Jesus ever called between his death and his resurrection, his resurrection and his ascension to heaven. He only called one meeting. He had a number of meetings, but only one that was scheduled. 3 groups attend this meeting that he called. Verse 16 says, the 11 disciples proceeded to Galilee, to the mountain which Jesus had designated. So the 11 disciples are at the meeting, that is minus Judas. 1 Corinthians 15 says that more than 500 brethren attended the meeting. The 11 are part of the 500, so around 489 that attended this meeting on the mountain. There's a third group that attends the meeting, because verse 20 says, and lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the age. Well, the age has not yet ended, so you and I are at the meeting. So since we've been invited to the meeting, why don't we mosey on up the mountain and find out what all this meeting is about and how it applies to you and me, God's officiating crew in history. We're told in verse 17 that when they saw the resurrected Christ, when they saw him, they worshiped him, but some were doubtful. Some had question marks. Questions about him, questions about the resurrection, questions about this new responsibility, questions about the establishment of the church. They had questions. But their questions didn't keep them home. Their questions brought them out, because it says that they came and worshiped with questions. They had doubts. Perhaps you're here today with questions. Questions about our world, questions about your faith. But your questions didn't keep you home. They brought you out. So did theirs. After the worship service was over, after the songs were sung, the prayers were prayed, Jesus steps to the podium. And this is what he says in verse 18. All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. The risen Christ says, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Translation, I'm in charge now. I'm not only in charge up there, heaven, I'm in charge down here, earth. I'm not only in charge in heaven, I'm also in charge in history. I'm not only in charge in eternity, I'm also in charge in time. He says that I am the link between time and eternity, and I'm in charge now. All authority. So there is nothing that sits outside of my kingdom rule. Nothing. No one. Because I'm in charge now. The word authority is an interesting one. There are a number of Greek words that can be translated authority. The main one in the New Testament is the word dunamis, where we get our English word dynamite from. Explosive power. But that's not the word used here. It's not dunamis. It's another word. It's a word pronounced ekousia. Ekousia means authorized use of power. Dunamis is just power. Ekousia means having the authorization to use it. On a football field, the players are younger, stronger, and faster than the officials. The officials are older, slower, and fatter. The players can knock you down, but the referees can put you out. Because while the players have dunamis, the referees have ekousia. See, they've got a whistle and a yellow flag. They have authority to overrule dunamis with ekousia. Jesus says all ekousia, authority, that is the authorization to use the power, belongs to me. Your enemy, this world, has dunamis. Jesus says, I have ekousia. I am the only authorized one. Up there, heaven, down here, earth. I'm in charge now. And with that, he issues the commission. There are 5 commissions in the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Acts. But this one is called the Great One, because this is the only one that uses this command: make disciples. That's the command. It's an imperative. It's not a request. It's a command. Don't just make converts. Don't just make Christians. Make disciples. So that raises the question: what is a disciple? A disciple is a man or a woman who is consistently operating under the rule of Jesus Christ in his or her life. A disciple is not merely a person who has accepted Christ to go to heaven. A disciple is also one where heaven gets to dictate to them on earth. A disciple is one who is a man or woman who is consistently living under Christ's rule in their decision making. In the same way that an official does not exist for the popularity of his cause. Sometimes he's going to be cheered, other times he's going to be booed, but he's not there for a popularity contest. He's there to reflect in the decisions he makes on the field the ruling that comes from above in the NFL offices. And he is measured by his decisions, not by his emotions. Discipleship is to come under the rule of God in your decision making and to consistently apply that across every area of your life. As you increasingly make decisions consistent with the rule of Christ, you are increasingly being a disciple. As you decrease in making decisions consistent with the rule of Christ, you are decreasing in being a disciple, even though you may be a Christian. Because discipleship is consistently operating under the rule of God. Plato was a philosopher who came up with a philosophical scheme that divided the physical world from the spiritual world. You and I today call it sacred and secular. There's that sacred thing, the spiritual realm, and then that secular thing, and we divide the two. That came from Plato. Plato had a student who studied his philosophy named Aristotle, and Aristotle systematized the thought of Plato. We call that Aristotelian logic, where he organized Plato's thinking, and he developed schools called academies to train the next generation in the thinking of Plato that had been organized by him, Aristotle, to train these young people to infiltrate the society with this worldview. Even though Rome was the world power in Jesus' day, if you remember your history, you know about the Hellenization of Rome. That is, Rome was the military power, but Greek thought was prevailing it. That's because of the influence of Plato through Aristotle in these academies to train a generation of young people to think Platonically. The idea of discipleship is to have transferred to your mindset and to your functioning the thought process of Jesus applied on the field of play as it has been received from the kingdom above. And to the degree that we do that, we reflect Jesus' thoughts, decisions, and actions in our everyday life and experience. The problem today is not quite that we don't have enough Christians. The problem is that Christ doesn't have enough disciples. He has people who will go to church, but not people who will make consistently their decisions underneath his rule. In the book Kingdom Man, we talk about Exodus 34, where God, in verse 23 and 24, called all the men of Israel out, and he said, leave your wives and children at home, and I want all the men, just the males, he says, to come and meet with the Lord King your God. He uses 3 names for God: Elohim, Adonai, Yahweh. And he says, when you come meet with the Lord your God to find out what I want to tell you to do as a man, when you listen to me, then I'm going to send you back to your family and back to your country. And when I send you back to your family and back to your country, if you go back with the rule of me over you as a man, I will provide for your families. No nation will covet your land, and you will be protected when I can get all the males to come under the rule of God. What we're missing today are disciples, men and women, who consistently operate under divine rule, even though they know sometimes they're going to be booed because the crowd won't understand or agree with the decision. All authority has been given unto me, and I want you to make disciples. In our national ministry, we're on radio across the nation and television and the like, and people will order our CDs from our national ministry called the Urban Alternative. And they'll order our CDs. And so when they do, it works something like this. I get up on Sunday morning in our church and I preach a sermon, and it's recorded on a master CD. That master CD is then transferred from the church over to our national ministry, the Urban Alternative, and put on a master duplicator. The master tape is put on a master duplicator. Plugged into the master duplicator are slave units. These slave units make copies of the master. So 16 are run off at a time in the span of 2 minutes of a 45-minute message, and then they are mailed to people who have ordered the CDs or who get our monthly CDs, and they are spread around the country or around the world. What people get in the mail is a copy of the master. They don't get the master, but they get a copy of the master. But the copy of the master is so much like the master that it might as well be the master, even though it's not the master, because it reflects the master. What God is looking for in history are copies of the master. We're not the master. All authority has been given to Jesus Christ, but he wants to run off on us and make us copies of him so that our decision-making will reflect his decision-making. The decisions on the field will reflect the decisions from the kingdom, because we are reflections, manifestations of his rule. He says, make disciples. Why is it important that you and I not merely be Christians, accepting Jesus Christ as Savior to go to heaven, but also following Jesus Christ as Lord? Because only disciples get to share his authority. Remember the connection? All authority has been given to me. Now make disciples. He wants us to make disciples so we can piggyback on his authority. I'm chaplain of the Dallas Mavericks and have been since their inception. And they give me 4 tickets to the games. So I'll invite some of the guys from the church who want to go to the Maverick game. They'll say yes. I'll say, now don't drive, because if you drive, then you're going to have to pay $15 a car to park. I say ride with me, because I have a free complimentary parking space right in front of the basketball arena. So if you ride with me, you park for free, but not because of who you are, it's because of who I am. They don't know you, but they do know me. But because they know me and you're riding with me, you get what belongs to me attributed to you. We go through a private entrance, not the general public entrance. They will let you in the private entrance if you're with me. They're going to let you in the private entrance, but not because of who you are, it's because of who you're with. Because you're with me, you get my access, even though you're not me, because of your affinity and association with me. When we go downstairs, there's going to be a 4-course meal. You will get to eat for free. But not because of who you are, it's because of who I am. Your proximity to me will let you piggyback on the rights and privileges that belong to me. And when the game is over, we're not going to be rushing to get out of there, because we're not going to where everybody else is going. We're going up a private ramp, to a private elevator, out a private door, to a private parking lot, and we will be halfway home before most people have gotten to their cars. And all of that will happen because you're with me. Guess what Jesus says? Be my disciple and you're with me. That the rights and privileges that I possess, you can piggyback on. My son Anthony, who you have gotten to know somewhat in his music ministry, when he first started out, he was just a poor musician trying to make it. He called me and said, "Dad, will you pick me up from the airport?" I said, "Certainly." Drove out, pick him up from the airport. He's the third person off the plane. We greet each other. So we're on our way to baggage claim to get his bags. Halfway to baggage claim, I stopped, looked at him, and said, "Oh, no, you didn't." And he laughed because he knew exactly what I was talking about. You see, to be the third person off the plane, that means you're in first class. See, if you're the third person off the plane, that means you were sitting in first class. But he didn't have first class money. He didn't have a first class ticket. What he had was my name. Because he's junior. So I knew what he did. He went up to the agent and said, "My name is Anthony Evans. I'm an executive platinum flyer with American. Do you have any upgrades